Hello, friends. I hope you're out wandering through nature, exploring the natural world around you. Do you enjoy writing about your wanderings? Nature journaling is an awesome, fun way to remember all the adventures you have taken and how you felt during those journeys. If you're looking for some beautiful journals to keep track of all your wanderings, I have several available on Amazon, including some guided journals for children. Start your journey in journaling by clicking on the link in the show notes. Keep exploring the nature around you and keep journaling all your wanderings. Good morning, friends, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Paul, your host, and today I want to talk a little bit about noise. Yeah, lots of noise. Usually, when I edit my podcasts, I have a lot of edits that I'm cutting noise out because I don't want the background noise. Maybe a motorcycle went by. This one, I'm going to leave it all in. I am up early in the morning because I want to get some sense of silence here and listen to the birds, of course. But I do want to talk a little bit about the noise in our lives and the noise in nature. Now, I have a question for you to start out with. When was the last time you had silence in your life? And I'm not talking about the noise of drama and all that. I'm talking about silence as in quiet. Peace and quiet. Yeah. No real loud noises and all. I've been planning this episode about noise for a long time. I've been taking down notes. I've been doing research, and just this past couple of weeks, of course, we're in July, so you know what happens at the beginning of July, Independence Day, 4th of July, with all the fireworks. And this is our first year at our new residence in Orchard Park with the 4th of July. It was our first year with the 4th of July in the neighborhood. We didn't know what to expect. Our old place, yeah, we did hear some fireworks. Every once in a while we had some neighbors blowing off a few, but nothing major. Now here we had fireworks from the golf course across the road on Thursday night, the night before the 4th of July. And it was quite a large display, and it wasn't too far away, so it was pretty loud. The next day, 4th of July, we had the fireworks display for the town and some other towns in the area too we could hear, but they were kind of in the distance. But the worst part was it's like we were in a war zone. That's what it sounded like, because all our neighbors, well, not all of them, but it seemed like all of them, we had quite a few of the neighbors, blowing off fireworks. And I remember when I was a kid, you had firecrackers, the sparklers. Remember the sparklers that would burn your hand if you weren't careful? You would also have M80s. I think that was probably the biggest thing anyone would have. You also had, I don't even remember what they're called, pop rockets or something like that, where they would shoot up in the sky and just go boom, but not real loud. Now they're selling stuff that is real close to being what they're blowing off at these fireworks displays. They're really, really, really loud and noisy, and this went on all night long. And then the next day, Saturday, we figured we're going to get some residual stuff, which we did. It wasn't as bad as Friday. And all of a sudden, we went to bed, and it's like quarter of 12. Someone starts blowing off like 6 or 7 of these really big fireworks. And it wasn't too far from us either, so it was really loud. Woke me up, woke our dogs up. And our dogs were just going crazy through all this. And it made me think, which is not the first time, but it made me think, it's like, well, what is this doing to the wildlife and nature? I mean, I already knew that when you blow off fireworks, it's, putting a lot of pollutants into the waters, into our groundwater, into the air. I mean, all these chemicals that are in fireworks are being exploded in the air. But the noise pollution is even worse for nature. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. I want you to think about that question I asked too. Okay, when was the last time you actually had silence in your life? I mean, I go out into nature to relax, and I always like to listen. Right now I'm listening to the birds. I hope you can hear them in the background. I love listening to that. Yeah, but there's also road noise I'm hearing in the background. And pretty soon, people are going to start waking up to go to work, and it's going to get even noisier out here. So we're going to talk a little bit about noise today and what it does to the wildlife. So sit back and relax, and hopefully in a silent place, and enjoy listening to the podcast. So one of my favorite things, one of my favorite days maybe I should say, is Sunday mornings on the back porch. I love my Sunday mornings on the back porch. I'll listen to the birds, watch nature go by, and just enjoy being outdoors. So my back porch, I mean, I live in a community, so I have neighbors around. I can see all these backyards around me. But Sunday mornings, it's like very little traffic. I mean, we have a major highway probably about a half mile from where I am. I've never really measured the distance. I'll have to do that sometime. But it's probably about a half mile, you know, somewhere in there. And it gets a lot of big trucks on it, gets, you know, Harleys, it gets, so I'm often hearing that in the background. I've been here long enough now, I've shut most of it out, but if you remember my old residence, I don't know if I talked about it before, I think I have, there we lived about a mile from a speedway, dirt track, and every Friday night we had to go somewhere because it was so loud. You know, the cars going by were so loud. All those, you know, every time we heard the announcers, some nights I should say we heard the announcer, we heard every race, every revving of the engines, and yeah, it was so awful that we always found some place to go on a Friday night. It just was that bad. And then they would have these race weekends every once in a while too, and that was bad too. And once again, I was thinking, it's like, oh, what's this doing for the poor wildlife? I mean, wildlife is affected by this. Humans are a noisy species. I mean, we seem to really like our noise, whether it's intentional or not. I mean, I will sit here on my back porch some days, and even late at night, and I can hear the road. There's another road, busy road, not too far from me. That one's probably about a quarter mile. And I always thought it's going to be nice and quiet anyhow because we got a big buffer of trees between that road and us. But you can hear some of the cars going by. Not a lot, because it is supposed to be 30 miles an hour through that strip. No one does that. They're usually around 40, 45. But you will get people stopped at the light, and you get some of these cars that are, you know, the big trucks, I should say. Some of these trucks that they purposely have the big mufflers and the noisy mufflers on them, and they, you know, peel out at the light. As soon as that light turns green, it's like you can hear, and I'm sure even though it's early morning here, we may get some of those. You may hear them in the background. I'm not going to edit them out today. And, you know, other times you get the Harley Davidsons going by, purposely made loud. Some of those guys will drill holes in their muffler just to make them noisier. You get some of these hot rod cars that are really loud. You know, it's just, we're a noisy species. We don't care. Yeah, we don't care about disturbing the peace. We like our noise. And that's what it seems like to me. The one day the other day, I should say, I was hiking at Knox Farm State Park, And as I'm walking through the park, enjoying the peace and quiet and watching the birds and listening to the birds, watching the deer go by, all of a sudden I'm hearing behind me. It's like, what is that music? Where's that coming from? It sounded like someone playing a guitar. And I look back and here's this guy walking up from behind, with his little stereo on in his hand, and he's just walking past playing this acoustic music, which, it was nice music, but it was noisy. It was disturbing my peace. And it's like, and I've mentioned this before, I run into this all the time, people on the trails. I'm glad they're out in nature, but you're not really being with nature. You're being in nature. To be with nature, you should have it quiet so you can listen to the birds. Now, before we get too in-depth with all this noise thing, I do want to specify the difference between noise and sound. Often we use them interchangeably, but they are totally different things. Okay, so noise versus sound. Well, sound, definition is a vibration that travels through a medium, like air, water, or solid material, and can be heard when it reaches a human or animal ear. Okay, so sound is anything that we hear. Okay, and usually it's natural, but it doesn't have to be. Noise, on the other hand, is unwanted, unpleasant, or disruptive sound. Okay, so noise is sound, but sound is not noise. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So, noise, unwanted, unpleasant, disruptive sound. What's considered noise is subjective and it's context dependent. Okay, so it depends on the person. Some people, like the young kid who's driving that sports car and thinks it's cool, to him that's sound. It's not noise. Yeah, he enjoys listening to that loud Hemi engine, or it's like it's music to his ears. But to me, it's noise. So that's what I mean by it's subjective. My noise may not be someone else's noise. For instance, I was talking about the racetrack down the road from us. It's one of the reasons we actually moved away from that house. We moved out of that area. That was not the main reason. There were other reasons too. We wanted to get closer to our kids. We wanted to get closer to my wife's pottery business. There were a lot of other reasons, but that was one of the reasons that made us move, is the noise. The gunshots every Sunday morning. All Sunday, day long, all day long. Yeah, hunting community. We were out in the country. Everyone loves their guns in this country, and every Sunday during the day, we'd hear the gunshots, people practicing their guns. We'd hear it during the week sometimes, but noise, that was another reason we left our old house. One of the reasons. So I have, and this happens with noise, sound triggers that get to me. Okay, it's subjective. Some people, they may, not like the sound of blenders or country music or whatever. With me, it's vehicles, it's cars, racetracks. These sound triggers give me flashbacks of getting angry with my local town board members who would not listen to me because half of them were at the racetrack every Friday night. But letting them know that, hey, this is disturbing the peace. You guys have a noise ordinance, but you actually designed the noise ordinance around that racetrack. And yeah, so to me, that's what triggers me. Other people, it can be fireworks, So it depends on what your triggers are as to whether you consider it to be noise or just sound. So how does this affect wildlife? I told you how it affects me. I told you how it affects other people. I'll be quiet so you can hear the loud car going by. Why he didn't get a muffler, I don't know. Okay, anyhow, wouldn't it be amazing? I can't wait for the day that it's required that they don't sell any of these cars anymore. Everything's electric. Can you imagine everything being electric? It would be so quiet out there. But anyhow, how does this all affect the wildlife? Well, when there is noise, and we'll talk about things like fireworks. Okay, so fireworks, that's very loud. It's in the evening. How does that disrupt things? 4th of July. Okay, it's early July, the end of nesting season, but some birds are still nesting. So it disturbs their nesting. But one of the things is they're startled. Like I was saying, at 11:45 at night, I think it was Saturday night after the 4th of July, someone was blowing off fireworks, and it woke me up. It startled me. It startled my dogs. My dogs were a basket case 4th of July. And we even tried keeping them inside. We gave them rescue remedy. We gave them some CBD oil. You know, we tried to keep them as calm as possible. They kept wanting to come outside, but, you know, we just kept putting them back inside where it was a little quieter. But even in the house, they were just like a mess. And it's like, well, no one's got rescue remedy for these animals, for the birds, for the mammals. No. They get startled by these noises. And they do what we call the flight response. I mean, you have a sudden loud noise, you try to get away from it, especially if you don't know what it is. I mean, we hear this noise, and it's like we know it's fireworks. You know, we know it's a loud car. But if you're just sitting there peacefully and all of a sudden the big boom goes off, what do? You jump. Okay, you get startled. So does wildlife. You know, they're not expecting fireworks. We know it's the 4th of July. We're expecting fireworks. We know we live near a loud construction site. We're expecting the jackhammer to be fixing the road. So even though it's annoying to us, it doesn't really startle us as much. It's usually those sudden sounds. So any sudden loud noises, this can cause wildlife to flee and panic. They get scared. They're running away from that noise. It's the fight or flight response. They flight. Okay, they leave the area, whether it's a bird or a mammal. This can sometimes lead to injuries, collisions with cars, you know, abandonment of nests. Yes, I know, you're thinking, they wouldn't abandon their children. They're wild animals. They think differently than us. I mean, I would do anything to protect my children. But wild animals, they don't. You know, I explain to people all the time during nesting season about birds. I get phone calls. So I used to when I was a wildlife rehabilitator. But I used to get phone calls about, you know, some birds abandoning their nests. You know, it's like, hey, the bird hasn't been back in a while. It's like, well, something probably startled it. You know, if you're standing around and watching that nest constantly, mom's not going to come back. Yes, she loves her children, but she's more worried about her own safety. You know, they want to make sure that they can survive another day so that they can have more babies. But if you are a human, yes, we don't do that. We take care of our children, and we will put ourselves in danger before that danger hurts our children. Not with wild animals. So a mother who gets startled may fly and abandon the nest totally, figuring this is a dangerous area, I can't protect my children in it, and I will just go lay my eggs somewhere else. So yes, it does happen. A bird or an animal, a deer, fleeing from a loud noise, they don't know to stop at the road and look both ways, especially if they're in a panic. They can run across the road, get hit by a car. You know, sometimes this can lead to death. You know, a bird gets startled, flies into a window. smashes her head open. So yes, the startling from the noise can cause a flight response, which can injure or kill the wild animal. That's how dangerous this is. Another thing is they have done studies and found that repeated or intense noise exposure increases cortisol. Okay, it's a stress hormone. So you're talking about elevated stress hormones, and this happens in many animals. Okay, they've done studies on this, and what this does is it weakens the immune system, and it also disrupts reproduction. So now we're not just talking about sudden noises. You may think, okay, well maybe we should get rid of all these, loud fireworks, and well, there's still subtle noises. Animals who live near a construction site or near a highway, a road that's noisy, anything that creates a lot of noise constantly, that can disrupt them. A business. I know we have an obsession now with AI. Well, a lot of people don't realize that with this AI, they're building more and more data centers. And these data centers, they have to keep those computers cool, and the way they keep them cool is with air conditioning, with fans, and they're noisy buildings. So they put this building up, they're in some animal's habitat, they've learned to live with it because it's not a loud sudden noise, it's more of a constant noise. And so they get used to it, but it does disrupt them. It elevates that stress hormones. Now another thing that the noise, whether it's a sudden noise or usually it's the more constant noise, another thing that disrupts is communication. I mean, a lot of animals communicate with their voices. We do. I mean, if I'm talking to you right now, I'm communicating to you with my voice. I'm not doing it through mental telepathy. Yeah, I know when you're with someone, face to face, face signals, facial signals, it's kind of like talking, but most animals, they will talk with communication. Animals like birds, frogs, bats, they all rely on sound for communication. When you have noise pollution, yes, that's what we call it, it's polluting our sound, okay, our silence. When you have noise pollution, it masks the mating calls, it hides them, it hides distress signals, it will hide and mask the territorial warnings. All of these things are harmful to the animal. If you can't let your neighbors know, your other fellow robins know, hey, there's danger in the area, they're not going to flee that area. They're going to stick around. But they can't hear the warning call. You ever go out in the woods and you hear that chit, chit, chit? Those are warning calls. Those are letting everyone know, hey, there's one of those big human things in the woods here, so just keep an eye out, keep a watch out. You never know what's going to happen. Maybe a fox comes across the lawn, and all those birds who are nesting in that field, they're letting the other birds know, hey, there's danger here. So it's disrupting that. If the other bird doesn't hear that, they're in danger. Yeah, they didn't hear that warning call. Other times, a lot of animals will use territorial calls. They're like, hey, this is my area, this is where I live, I don't want you in it, okay? I've got young to protect. If they let the calls out, they're warning the other birds or the other animals, don't come in here, this is my area, and they come in anyhow because they didn't hear the call, there's going to be a fight. Yeah, there's going to be a territorial dispute, and someone's going to get injured or killed. So it's hiding, it's masking all these calls. And one of the important ones is mating calls. I mean, a lot of animals will use calls to attract a mate. If the mate cannot hear the call, Oop, I'm hearing the birds out here, even over all the road noise. If that animal, that bird, cannot hear the mating call, it can't find a mate, there's a year where it doesn't have young. Population drops because of that. Now, another thing that noise does to the animals is it alters feeding and movement patterns. What do I mean by that? Well, you have mammals like deer, raccoons, fox. Many of these animals will avoid safe areas if there's loud human activity there. And this limits their access to their food and water in that area. It limits them to their normal migration pattern, their normal routes through the woods, through the fields. Okay, they will avoid that area because they're hearing a lot of noise, and to them that means trouble, it means danger. So these animals, and this is mostly mammals here that do it, but birds do too. Birds can usually fly around or over, but mammals will usually have, well, let's put it this way, they're creatures of habit. They have routes that they are constantly taking. You ever follow a deer trail through the woods? You'll take that trail because it's been packed down. It's very obvious where the trail is, and the reason is because that deer is using it every single day. It's like, yep, this is my route. This is where I go. We have deer in our backyard that will come through. It's like you can almost know that it's like just after sunset, when you still have that twilight in the air. You know, it's still a little bit light, but the sun's not out. That's when we usually see the deer coming across. It's like same deer, same pattern. You know, sometimes they'll go in a different direction. You know, sometimes they'll go as far into the neighbor's yard, but you know, they still are creatures of habit. And if you have a loud noise, they see that as danger. They're not going to go there anymore. They're going to go somewhere else. Find a different food source. It may not be as healthy as this food source. Find a new water source. May be polluted. You know, so they have to alter their feeding patterns and their movement patterns. And what about the young animals? Does this impact them? Well, yeah. Noise, any disruptive noise, whether it's a sudden burst or a constant noise, okay, that will impact the young animals. Nestlings, other young animals, I talked earlier, you know, especially with like fireworks and loud sudden noises, the parents may abandon the nest. Okay, the adults flee in fear, and then they don't return, at least not quickly enough. Sometimes they don't return at all. Yeah. So this happens mostly during sudden noises where they'll abandon the nest. Sometimes a parent, you know, if they're in an area and they feel they're in danger, whether it's a mammal or a bird, they will leave and not come back, especially if it's a constant noise. Most of the time they just don't nest in that area. They won't have their young in that area. But if they did, and then the noise started after that, they will leave and they won't come back. Or they come back and their child is malnourished, didn't get fed for a few days, could be dead, could be very sick. So it does affect the young, and it's mostly because the parents are fleeing. Now there's a study back in 2019 through 2020 in Valencia, Spain, where researchers actually compared house sparrow productivity in towns with noisy festivals during breeding season versus quieter control towns. So they had towns that didn't have a lot of festivals in the spring when the birds were breeding, and they also had some towns that had a lot of festivals in the spring during breeding season. And what they found between the control towns and the towns with the festivals is that there was a significantly fewer juveniles, fewer babies, fewer young, after the festivals. Now in 2020, they were still researching this, and the festivals were canceled in those towns. And they found in some of the towns, I shouldn't say all the towns, but when the events were canceled, productivity did rebound to the control levels. So they were basically like, oh, well, it's too noisy here. Yeah, we're not going to lay our eggs here. We're not going to raise our young here. We're going elsewhere. Sometimes if they already had, and then the festivals happen, the birds would go elsewhere. So they have done studies on this. There's scientific proof that this does affect the wild animals. Now, there was another study done in Australia, and this study was on traffic noise. They were trying to see, how does traffic noise affect birds' eggs and hatchings? And they did find that bird eggs and hatchlings exposed to urban noise were 20% less likely to hatch. So they're still laying their eggs there, but because of all the noise, the parents are more disturbed, their routines are more disturbed, they're not staying on the nests long enough, and they found that 20% did not hatch. And the chicks that did hatch, okay, so you've got 80% that hatched, 20% that didn't. 10% of those chicks that hatched were 10% smaller and lighter in weight. They also found that these birds in the areas, and remember this was an Australian study, but it doesn't matter where it is, it happens everywhere. So they're smaller, but they also had shorter telomeres. Now, if you're not familiar with that term, it's basically a protective coating for the end of a chromosome. Okay, so we're getting down to the biological level of these birds. And what that did is it actually caused them to have 50% fewer offspring when they reached adulthood. So it's actually affecting the genes of these birds, so that when they did get older, they couldn't produce as many offspring. 50% less, that's half. So half as many offspring because it was affecting their genes. Now I briefly want to talk about the sudden ones. I talked a little bit about this already, but I want to get a little bit more in depth, but not too much. The sudden noises, okay, the startling noises that startle flight response, that type of noise, like fireworks. The fireworks on the 4th of July, we have here where I'm living, we were around in August last year, so we ended up being around during the Erie County Fair, which is not too far from us, and every night during the fair, which is, I believe, 11 days of the fair, I can't remember, it's either 10 or 11, but every night, fireworks. It was far enough away, it wasn't very disturbing, but it was a little bit. We have our Orchard Park days coming up, and on Friday night they're going to have fireworks, and yeah, so there is still fireworks going on throughout the summer here and there, other celebrations going on. So those are the noises I want to talk a little bit more about. I told you how my dogs were affected. I was really surprised I didn't hear more dogs. My one dog was just cower in a corner, and my other dog barks at the fireworks, but he is shaking, and yeah, and like I said, we tried to give him some natural things to calm him down. We tried to keep him in where it was quieter, but they're so noisy, you can hear them even in the house. So these louder, more explosive fireworks, that sort of noise where it's really quick, one and done, not a constant noise, that has impacts like bird flock disturbances they found. What I mean by that is, they actually did radar studies, and they showed that massive flocks of birds would actually take off during fireworks. I mean, these are birds who are supposed to be taking it easy for the night. They're on a migration, or they're moving from one area to another in their territory, and they have their nightly, place where they rest, they roost, and all of a sudden you have this loud boom. All those birds all at once take off in the middle of the night. And they found that they will fly sometimes for hours. And like I said, this was a study they did with radar, where they'd suddenly see this large flock of birds on the radar screen, and they would take off and they would fly for hours. It was exhausting them. And they would also have collisions with buildings, trees, sometimes each other. They can't see, it's nighttime. It's dark. So, is that big loud truck necessary? No. But that guy thinks it's cool. To him, it's the sound of music. Yes. No. I won't get into that. So these bird flock disturbance at night. Also marine and aquatic life they found. Underwater shock waves from the fireworks near lakes or coasts. I know on New Year's they have a big celebration at the waterfront here in Buffalo, and you've got Lake Erie nearby. Other places I've seen fireworks on TV on New Year's where they have it close to the waterfront. They have found through studies that the shock waves, underwater shock waves near these lakes or coasts, it can disorient and harm fish and amphibians too. Plus the chemicals from the firework debris that gets into the waterways and it contaminates it, but we're talking noise here for today. They also found that with fireworks, nocturnal animals like bats, owls, or insects, they're active at nighttime. They are especially vulnerable since the fireworks occur after dark. So it interferes with their foraging, finding food, and navigation. So they're trying to fly at nighttime, and these fireworks, the bright light, the noise, it's all affecting them finding food and navigating in the dark. There was a Netherlands radar study again. Yeah, they like using the radar to study these things because they can get a better, larger picture. So anyhow, in the Netherlands, there was a radar study on New Year's Eve. They found that on New Year's Eve, up to 1,000 times more birds were observed aloft compared to typical nights. That's a big increase. Yeah, the elevated flight persisted up to 10 kilometers from the fireworks sources. This was particularly among larger bird species they found. So that was in the Netherlands, a study they did. 1,000 times more birds. And another study found, and this is more local, they did a study in Arkansas in 2010. There was a massive red-winged blackbird die-off, and they linked it to disoriented birds flying into obstacles after the fireworks. They were just so disoriented, so that flight response. So yeah, fireworks, these loud, sudden noises are really disrupting the birds and the other animals that are out at nighttime, like bats too. Well, I apologize, but I've gone a little long. Like I said, I've been researching this topic a long time, and I want to get into more about like ecosystem-wide disturbances, and some of that other information. But I also want to talk a little bit about how you can prevent a lot of this from happening. What we can do as a society, what you can do yourself. But unfortunately, we're out of time. I went well over my half-hour allowance. I know I do every once in a while, but I've got a lot more to talk about. So we're going to make this into a two-parter. So I'm going to stop here, and I look forward to seeing you next week. I'd like to thank you for joining me. If you would like to support the podcast, be sure to visit the show notes, go to my Ko-Fi page, make a donation. You can also buy Nature Wanderer merch at my merch store, links in the show notes, and great nature journaling. Yeah, if you love nature journaling, I've got nature journals for sale, guided ones and just open page ones where you can do some journaling. I hope you enjoyed listening today, and I hope you'll come back next week to find out a little bit more about how noise affects nature and wildlife, and also, here's a surprise, how it affects plants. Yes, it does. And I want to also talk a little bit next week about how you can help the wildlife, what you can do and what we can do as a society. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Enjoy the rest of your week, and above all, keep exploring the nature around you. Hey there, fellow nature wanderers. If you're like me, you love spending time outdoors, breathing in that fresh air and connecting with the natural world. But at home, have you ever thought about what's in the products you use every single day? That's why I'm excited to share Apple Valley Natural Soap with you. Their handcrafted all-natural soaps are made with organic ingredients, essential oils, and no harsh chemicals. Awesome! So they're not only great for your skin, but they're safe for the planet. And they don't just stop at soap. Apple Valley Natural Soap also carries a full line of natural skincare products, including shampoos, body butters, facial bars, and more. All designed to nourish your skin without synthetic ingredients. You can't beat that. That's just awesome. Whether you're hiking in the woods or just winding down after a long day, their products bring a little bit of nature right into your home. And the best part? By supporting Apple Valley Natural Soap through the Nature Wanderer, you're also supporting this podcast. Just head to the show notes and click on the link for Apple Valley Natural Soap. So go ahead, treat yourself and the environment to something better. Your skin and Mother Nature will thank you. Now let's get on with our adventure.